Aileen Wuornos was born on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan. Her life began with hardship. Her father was a convicted child molester who committed suicide in prison. Her mother abandoned her and her brother, leaving them to be raised by their grandparents. Wuornos faced severe abuse at the hands of her grandfather. By the age of 11, she was engaging in sexual activities in exchange for cigarettes, drugs, and food. At 14, Wuornos became pregnant, allegedly by a friend of her grandfather. She was sent to a home for unwed mothers and her baby was put up for adoption. Soon after, she dropped out of school and began a life of hitchhiking and petty crime. This marked the beginning of her descent into a life filled with violence and instability. The abuse she endured left deep psychological scars. These experiences would later be cited as factors contributing to her criminal behavior. As a teenager, Wuornos turned to prostitution to survive. She hitchhiked across the United States, selling her body to make ends meet. This lifestyle exposed her to further abuse and danger. She often found herself in violent situations with clients who would take advantage of her vulnerability. Wuornos's life on the streets was harsh. Her interactions with men were often brutal, reinforcing her distrust and hatred towards them. Despite the risks, prostitution was her primary means of survival. She moved from town to town, never staying in one place for too long. The constant instability only deepened her sense of isolation and desperation. This relentless cycle of exploitation and violence set the stage for the crimes she would later commit. Between 1989 and 1990, Wuornos killed 7 men. She claimed they had either assaulted or attempted to assault her while she was working as a prostitute. Her defense was that she acted in self-defense to protect herself from imminent danger.
He brutally raped me. I had no choice but to defend myself.
Wuornos's first victim was Richard Mallory, a convicted rapist. She shot him multiple times, later stating he had brutally raped her. This pattern continued with her subsequent victims. Each time she insisted that she was fighting for her life. The brutality of the murders, however, raised questions. The men were shot multiple times, often in ways that suggested overkill. This excessive violence led many to believe that her actions were driven by more than just self-defense. The truth behind her motives remained a contentious issue. The prosecution argued that Wuornos's motive was not self-defense, but robbery. They pointed to the fact that she used her victims' belongings after the murders. Items such as cars, credit cards, and cash were found in her possession.
Wuornos's use of her victim's property painted a different picture. It indicated premeditation and a willingness to kill for profit.
The prosecution contended that she targeted men who appeared wealthy and vulnerable. Her actions were seen as those of a predator, not a victim. The narrative of a cold-blooded killer was reinforced by the testimony of her girlfriend, Tyria Moore. Moore claimed Wuornos had confessed to the murders and had shown no remorse. The jury was faced with 2 conflicting stories, a woman claiming to have acted out of fear and desperation, and a calculated murderer driven by greed. The prosecution's portrayal of Wuornos as a ruthless killer ultimately swayed the jury, leading to her conviction. Wuornos's psychological state was a focal point of her defense. Experts testified about her traumatic childhood and the impact it had on her mental health.
They argued that the abuse she suffered left her with severe psychological scars, contributing to her violent behavior. Diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, Wuornos exhibited symptoms of extreme emotional instability and impulsivity.
Her relationships were tumultuous, marked by intense fear of abandonment.
The defense also highlighted her history of sexual abuse. The repeated trauma she experienced from a young age was seen as a catalyst for her later actions. Despite these arguments, the court was not swayed. Wuornos's mental health issues were acknowledged, but ultimately did not absolve her of responsibility for the murders. Her troubled mind was a tragic element of her story, adding to the complexity of her character.
The debate over Wuornos's true motives continues to this day. Was she a victim lashing out in self-defense or a cold-blooded killer driven by greed? Supporters of Wuornos argue that her actions were a desperate response to a lifetime of abuse. They believe she was pushed to the brink by the violence she endured and saw no other way to protect herself. Critics, however, point to the calculated nature of her crimes. The use of her victims' belongings and the excessive violence suggest a premeditated intent to kill. They view her as a manipulative predator who used her tragic background to garner sympathy and evade justice. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Wuornos' life was a complex web of trauma, survival, and violence. The ambiguity of her motives adds to the enduring fascination with her story.
Aileen Wuornos was a complex figure. Her life was a tapestry of contradictions. She was both a victim and a perpetrator, a woman shaped by abuse and driven to commit horrific acts.
Understanding her character requires delving into the nuances of her experiences and the psychological impact of her trauma. Wuornos' actions were a manifestation of her inner turmoil. The violence she inflicted on her victims mirrored the violence she had endured.
Her sense of worthlessness and desperation drove her to extreme measures, blurring the lines between self-defense and murder.
The bond with Tyria Moore was one of the few constants in her life, yet it was fraught with tension. Wuornos' fear of abandonment and need for validation played out in destructive ways, further complicating her already troubled existence. Her story is a stark reminder of the impact of trauma and the difficult path to understanding the human psyche. Aileen Wuornos' story has had a significant impact on popular culture. Her life and crimes have been the subject of numerous documentaries, books, and films.
The 2003 film Monster, starring Charlize Theron, brought Wuornos' story to a wider audience. Theron's portrayal of Wuornos earned her an Academy Award, highlighting the depth and complexity of the character.
Documentaries such as Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer by Nick Broomfield have provided an in-depth look at her life and the legal proceedings. These works have contributed to the ongoing debate about her motives and the factors that led to her actions.
They offer a window into the mind of a woman whose life was marked by tragedy and violence. Wuornos' story continues to resonate with audiences because it challenges our understanding of morality and justice. Her legacy in popular culture is a testament to the enduring fascination with her complex and tragic life.
The retelling of Aileen Wuornos' story through documentaries and films has kept her legacy alive. These works offer varying perspectives on her life, from sympathetic portrayals to critical examinations. Each retelling adds a layer of complexity to our understanding of her character. Nick Broomfield's documentaries, Aileen Wuornos, The Selling of a Serial Killer, and Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer, provide a raw and unfiltered look at Wuornos' life and the media circus surrounding her trial. Broomfield's approach highlights the exploitation and sensationalism that often accompany high-profile criminal cases. The film Monster humanizes Wuornos, portraying her as a deeply troubled individual driven by desperation and rage. Charlize Theron's performance brings nuance to the character, capturing the vulnerability and volatility that defined Wuornos' life. Books such as Dear Dawn, Aileen Wuornos, in her own words, offer a more personal glimpse into her thoughts and feelings. Compiled from letters Wuornos wrote to her childhood friend, the book provides insight into her psyche and the factors that influenced her actions. These retellings serve to keep Wuornos' story in the public consciousness, challenging us to look beyond the surface and consider the deeper issues at play. Aileen Wuornos' life and crimes leave us with more questions than answers. Her story is a tragic reflection of the impact of abuse, trauma, and desperation. It challenges our perceptions of morality and justice, forcing us to confront the complexities of the human psyche. Wuornos was a product of her environment, shaped by a lifetime of violence and neglect. Her actions were a manifestation of her inner turmoil, blurring the lines between victim and perpetrator. Understanding her motives requires a nuanced approach, considering the interplay between her traumatic past and her criminal behavior. The debate over her true motives continues, reflecting the enduring fascination with her story. Whether seen as a victim fighting back or a cold-blooded killer, Wuornos' life defies simple categorization. In popular culture, Wuornos' story has been retold through films, documentaries, and books, adding depth to our understanding of her life. Aileen Wuornos' legacy is a testament to the enduring impact of trauma and the complexities of the human experience.